Okay, we're going to do question 4 from February of 2008. It's a wills and trust essay. Generally, I wanted to do only trust, but trust essays that standing alone are very hard to find. There's only been 2 of them tested in the last 16 years that have stood on their own. 3 in the last 20 years that have stood on their own. So we're going to do a little mixture of wills and trusts. And if you haven't reviewed wills, it's okay. Stay with us on this one. Let's go to the call of the question. So the way we do essays here on the video, on the audio, and the way we teach it in class is the same way you're going to be doing on the bar exam. So everything is, you want to slip into the same pattern every single time. There's a process to doing this, there's a method, and there's a way to make yourself get the most out of what the examiners are trying to test. All right, call number 1. What argument should church make in support of its claim, and what is the likely result? So all we know is that church has a claim. We don't know what church's claim is, but church and results. So we're going to get to the results. We'll usually answer that anyways, so it's almost unnecessary to write it up there, but make sure you do answer the call to question with that. For ease, I'm just going to write down church. By the way, if you have not read this fact pattern yet, pause it, read the fact pattern at least 3 times, and then go ahead and then come join us back in, jump back in, because the purpose of this is for you to understand what's going on in the fact pattern, to be able to analyze it on the way that you're supposed to analyze it, and the way the examiners want you to see things. So if you haven't read the fact pattern yet, make sure to do so at least 2 or 3 times. Okay, and read it slowly and carefully so that you fully understand it. Okay, number 1, church. Number 2, what argument should Sis and Dora? So we have Sis and Dora. No, they're going to have separate arguments, you have to assume. Make in support of their respective claims, and what is the likely result? Notice the examiners say, answer question 2 according to California law. Why are they saying answer question 2 according to California law, but not question 1? I'll tell you why. And this is extremely important to understand. Most people just go blindly through these essays and don't understand why that is. Here is why. This is the trust portion. This is the wills portion. How do we know that? Wills and community property are California-specific subjects. It'll say, answer according to California law when it's wills and community property. But when it's trusts, they will not say answer according to California law. Why? Because trust is not a California-specific subject. In fact, you're tested on general principles. And every subject on the California bar exam is tested according to general principles. The only ones that are California specific are wills, community property. There's also PR, but that's mostly ABA with some California distinctions. Then they have California evidence, which is made, starting in 2008, became a new subject of the bar. And now they have California Civ Pro, which they've done once in the 10 years that they said that they would test it. They did it one time, and it was just a sliver. It was mostly federal, so I almost don't even include that as a particular subject. Anyways, the important thing to notice is it says answer question 2 according to California law. You're like, okay, this is the wills, this is the trust. Got it. It should make your organization extremely easy. Also, one of the things I want you to notice with the fact pattern. It starts off in 2001, the next paragraph, 2002, then in 2007, and then shortly thereafter. Want to make these essays really easy? Start doing these things. This is not a full essay. All you want to do is this. You want to break up the essay, make it super easy. Each paragraph is going to go to a certain separate issue, and you're going to discuss those issues. So this really isn't one big essay that's so hard to digest. It's actually a compilation of small little essays and questions that they're asking you with issues in each one. So that's how you know what the examiners are doing. They do this all the time. There's no secret. There's no trick to this. They're not making it difficult. It's a state licensing exam, for God's sake. They're trying to make it easy on you. You guys just refuse to see it because you're so stressed out. Take it easy, breathe, relax, and see how absolutely simple this could really be. All right, 2001. Wilma, an elderly widow. Why are they saying she's a widow? Because they're saying this isn't community property. When they call someone a widow, it's not. There can't be any community property issues because their husband or their spouse is dead. All right, with full mental capacity. The examiners go out of their way to mention mental capacity, which is kind of like she has full mental capacity, which turns out to be an argument for someone that she's an elderly widow, that she didn't have mental capacity, but that argument's going to fall flat. In fact, it's a very, very quick discussion, if that. Put $1 million into a trust, it's the trust, and the trust instrument named Wilma's church as the beneficiary. Although the trust instrument did not name a trustee, its terms recited that the trustee has broad powers of administration for the benefit of the beneficiary. Okay, so we know this is the trust aspect. Well, that makes it easy, and we know this is the wills aspect. So we're talking about the creation of a trust. Because the first paragraph talks about the creation of a trust. And what's the best way to do it? Trust purple birds. And you can put these in any order you want. The examiners are not adamant about where. So how do we do this? We have a trustee. But here, who's our trustee? Well, the instrument did not name a trustee. Well, the trust is not going to fail for lack of a trustee. The court's going to appoint one. Very often tested for some reason. Then we have the purpose. What's the purpose? Estate planning. That's always just a good purpose. Or to support the church. The beneficiary is the church. They're named. The intent, obviously, she created the instrument and put the money in the property. We have the race, that's the $1 million. We have the delivery, when she puts the money into the trust. And who's the settler? That's Wilma. There you go. Creation of a trust. Boom, done. That simple. So that's all paragraph 1 was about, was the creation of a trust. We did the trust purple birds. Boom, we filled it in. We're 25% of the way there. It was that simple. Okay, moving along. 2002, Wilma's sister, Sis, began paying a great deal of attention to Wilma, preventing any other friends or relatives from visiting Wilma. What's she doing? She's isolating this elderly woman and saying, hey, I'm the only person that's here to care for you, and it's kind of exerting a little bit of influence over her decision-making. Undue influence is going to be the next issue. And who's doing it? Sis. So we're going to have undue influence, which is a wills issue. It's also a trust issue. And we use the mnemonic soup. Rarely do I use mnemonics, but sometimes, obviously, when you have to, I do. So that's when you're susceptible. You have the opportunity. It's an unnatural request, and you participated. You actively participated in doing it. Okay. Now, these are factors. They're not elements. What's the difference? If they're elements, all of them need to be met in order to prove your case. That's like negligence. You need to prove duty, breach, causation, and damages. Those are elements. Factors are what the court's going to look at. They're going to look at, were you susceptible? Did the person have the opportunity? Did they actively participate in procuring the gift? Was it a natural disposition? The court's going to look at all that to determine whether or not it was procured by undue influence. So we're going to get to that in a second. And again, you notice how it lines up. Like, we already know this is the wills issue because she's trying to procure the will. We're going to see that. Preventing any friends. In 2003, Wilma reluctantly executed a properly witnessed will. Now, they said properly witnessed, which means the formal execution part is not an issue, and that's a way for you to save time. When people go over time on these essays, it's because they write about immaterial information. They write about stuff that's unnecessary the examiners are not asking you about. I know some people will tell you, and they're complete amateurs and idiots in my opinion, oh, throw everything in there, go, you're going to get points. You do not get points for things that are not mentioned. Think about how illogical that sounds. If you did, you would just write every single thing you knew about the subject and ignore the fact pattern. And that's completely contrary to the instructions. And think about it. If you got a common law essay on First Amendment, and all you wrote about was equal protection, the 10th Amendment, dormant commerce clause, presidential powers, you really think you're going to get a perfect score because you nailed all those issues and you didn't discuss what they actually want you to discuss? So when the examiners tell you to discuss something, discuss it. They're getting at, here they got first paragraph, creation of a trust. This paragraph, they're getting at undue influence. They're not asking about formation. That's not what they're asking about. So pay attention to what the examiners are asking you in order to answer it properly. Because if you start throwing in all the unnecessary issues, you're going to go over time. If you go over time, guess what? You're going to shoot yourself in the foot for the next essay. And then if you do it on day one, you're going to be stressed out on day two, thinking about day one. And it's just an unending cycle. So make sure you have the confidence to know what to discuss and what not to discuss. Confidence does do great things on this exam. So Wilma reluctantly executed the will. Following the execution of the will, Wilma and Sis began to develop a genuine fondness for each other, engaging in social events frequently and becoming close friends. In 2005, Wilma wrote a note to herself, "I'm glad Sis will benefit from my estate." Okay, so was Wilma susceptible to undue influence? Yes, because she was elderly and no other friends or relatives were prevented. So she was susceptible. Did Sis have the opportunity to procure the will by undue influence? Absolutely. And we know that because she prevented everyone else from visiting her. She spent a great deal of time and attention with her, and she made her reluctantly execute the will. So clearly she had the opportunity. Clearly she participated in the device because she's the one who got her to reluctantly execute the will. But it's not unnatural. This is a totally natural disposition. And one of the things we're going to find out is, and this is why you read it 2 or 3 times, was that the only people Wilma could give money to were Sis and Dora, and she hadn't spoke to Dora in 20 years. So we have this widow whose husband probably committed suicide because, from what I'm gathering, Wilma's quite a bitch. Her sister that didn't like her, and then her daughter that hasn't talked to her in 20 years. Who else is she going to give the money to? So even though it's unnatural, so whether or not it was procured by undue influence, your conclusion is irrelevant. I personally don't think there was undue influence because, years had gone by, they engaged in social events, they became close friends, and 2 years after the will was reluctantly executed, Wilma said, "Hey, I'm glad Sis will benefit from my estate." And since she wrote the note to herself, that could be like a holographic kind of will that incorporates the other will. You don't want to get into that whole discussion, but I could see like a quick little one-liner doing that. So I have a hard time believing that the court's going to find undue influence under these facts. Okay, 2007, Wilma named Sis as trustee of the trust, which was when Sis found out for the first time about the $1 million in the trust. Okay, so now we have the trustee. We know the trustee is going to be Sis. So you notice how, again, when we read the call of the question that said, call 1 was trust, call 2 is wills, you see how easy it is to start organizing things when the examiners give it to you. Pay attention to what the examiners are doing. So now we know we're back on the trust game. Which, without telling Wilma, Sis wrote across the trust instrument, "This trust is revoked," signing her name as trustee. All right, so now she's terminating the trust. So let's take that as its own separate box here. Termination. Well, how do you terminate a trust? All agree, that's the settlor, plus all the beneficiaries. So that's not what happened. Wilma did not agree, and definitely Church did not agree. All the beneficiaries agree. Well, that didn't happen because the only beneficiary here is Church, and Church had no idea. How about by the express terms? Well, the express terms did not have the trust end the way that it did end, where the trustee is given the power. Was the Sis given the power? Nope. And the only other way to get it is, let's see, all the beneficiaries agree, the express terms, the trustee is given the power, and the last one is, we got the own terms, I'm missing one. The settlor's power. The settlor's not the one revoking it, or trying to revoke it. So clearly it has not been terminated properly, so therefore it has not been terminated. So Church is going to get the $1 million in trust because the termination was wrongful, it's a breach of trust, and even if Sis was to get the money, she'll be forced to give the money back to Church under a constructive trust theory. You don't really need to go into all that because, you could, I guess, with the, it's just a one-liner. I don't know if the model answer actually did that. But anyways, the thing is, it's not going to be terminated. Trust is still entitled, and that's what paragraph 3 is about. So paragraphs 1 and 3 go to the trust issue. Okay, shortly thereafter, Wilma died. So now Wilma's dead, survived by her daughter, Dora, who had not spoken to Wilma for 20 years. Not spoken in 20 years. So it seems like her only heirs at law, if you will, for lack of a better term, are Sis and Dora. And Dora hasn't spoken in 20 years, so it's not unnatural to give all the money to Sis. Church claims that the trust is valid and remains in effect. That's proper claim because it wasn't terminated properly. Sis and Dora each claim that each is entitled to Wilma's estate. Well, the only way Dora, let's take a look at that. How would Sis, what would be their respective claims? Well, we know the undue influence. Sis isn't going to be the one proving undue influence. It's going to be Dora. So we just shift that over here. So that goes, Dora's going to say that Sis procured her by undue influence. Obviously, that's not going to be Sis's argument because Sis is the one who wants to get the property. So we talked about the creation of a trust with church. We talked about the termination with Sis, which clearly it wasn't terminated. That's pretty easy. We've already gone through all that. Now, what argument can Sis make? This is where it gets a little tough because she really doesn't even have an argument. The only argument that Sis had would be that Sis really doesn't have any arguments. Actually, Sis doesn't have any arguments I can think of. And it's ironically that the examiners ask about that. I'm surprised they put Sis in there because if you boil it down, there's nothing there. Dora, I guess Sis could argue that she lacked mental capacity, but that's not going to fly because it says she was fully mentally capable, she attended social events, and she knew what she was doing. She completely knew the objects of her bounty because it says, I'm glad Sis will benefit. So she understood the nature and extent of her property, how much it was. She knew who her close family members are. That's the only argument Sis can really make is mental capacity. And it's almost impossible to even come up with that argument because it's so tenuous. As for undue influence, Dora's going to say that Sis procured her by undue influence, so therefore Sis should not take on the will and Dora should get her intestacy share, which would be 100% because it would go to child ahead of brother and sister, a sibling. So Dora would get 100%. Dora would also say that Sis procured her by, again, undue influence. We said that. And the last one that you could possibly come up with, which is not going to work, is omitted child. And Dora could say, hey, I'm her daughter. She forgot about me, which is not true because they haven't talked in 20 years. So the pretermitted child issue is going to get struck down. Now your question is, well, even though it's going to fail, do I still bring it up? The answer is yes, because it's relevant, because she is a child and they're asking you for what kind of claims she can make. And even though the claim for undue influence probably isn't going to work, even though the claim for mental capacity is not going to work, and even though the claim for pretermitted child is not going to work, you still might want to bring that. You still have to bring those up, even if it's quick, just to shut them down, because they have no other arguments. I mean, there really are no other arguments for them to make. And those are the only three logical ones based on the facts. Because it said, elderly widow, so that kind of, we talked elderly widow, that goes to mental capacity, but they did say she has full mental capacity. The key is there are facts there that bring up the issue. Then the undue influence is really easy to find. And the last one is, Dora survived by her daughter. And what kind of claim can a daughter make in her parents' estate? Is that I'm an omitted child. So that one's the really, really hard one to find. It's a real quick issue, which means the examiners didn't expect a huge discussion of it. She's definitely not a pretermitted child because Wilma knew about Dora's existence. And there you go. That's a wrap. That's the Wills and Trust essays from 2008, February question 4. Creation of a trust, termination, undue influence, pretermitted child, and the final issue was mental capacity. That's all.